This is Joanne Hillhouse, and I'm here with Foster Joseph, jazz vocalist who has a new project out and who has new projects in the works. And I want to talk to him today about music and the creation of music and his love of jazz. Thanks for being with me today, Foster.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Tell me what you're working on right now. Let's start there.
I'm working on a big band project. It was recorded in 2015 at the Lakers Center. Sherman Irby is the producer. For people not familiar with Sherman Irby, he is the lead alto player with the Jazz Layton Center Orchestra.
Okay.
And he called me and told me that they would provide me with the studio free. So it was a gift. They gave me the studio free. I had to just pay the musicians and the engineer. And it was actually really reduced cost. So it wasn't an expensive venture. It was a 9-piece plus myself. So it's a no-net, 6 horns, and rhythm section, bass, drums, and piano in the rhythm section.
So I was going to ask you, what do you mean by a big band project? You mean something that has a full orchestra, as opposed to what you normally do, which is you and your piano, correct?
Yes, normally me and my trio. I like trio or quartet.
Okay.
Generally, see me in a trio or quartet setting. When I'm home, it's usually by myself. That is going to change shortly. I'm going to have a trio in a matter of weeks.
Did you see the movie Soul? Did you like it?
No, I don't get to see much movies now.
Just now when you spoke about the trio and being where your zone is, I thought of that movie because there's an element of that movie that has to do with finding that sweet spot in the music that transports you beyond your body. Have you ever experienced that as a player?
Oh yes, that is an incredible feeling. I talked to my brother about it. I asked him, that was years ago, when I was about 15. I asked him if he ever had that experience. And he said, yes, believe me, it's an out of the world experience. What happened with me? If I'm playing in a group and the rhythm is right, everything is what we call locked in. I will start to feel that way. You start to feel light, and you feel like it's out the body experience. I often say it's like in the church when they get in the spirit. That's exactly what it is. You get in the spirit. You make noise. You say you play at a level that you normally would not play.
Now you mentioned your brother. You mentioned your brother. It should be noted that you come from a family of musicians. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me about that and how that shaped you and who you are as a musician.
Well, I grew up. I'm the last of 7, and my father was a musician. He was a musician from 1926 to 37. My mother stopped him from playing when they got married.
You can only have one love, one true love.
Yes, so she put an end to that. So at first I was interested in the clarinet because all my siblings played piano. And a gentleman used to walk by the house in the evening when he went to perform, a musician. And he looked at me, and I was about 7 years old, and he said, "Why are you playing the clarinet? You will never get any work with it." And later, I switched briefly to the tenor sax. But then I used to walk with my brother, and everyone would always ask, "Can he play?" And they didn't talk about saxophone or clarinet or anything like that. They wanted to know if I could play piano. And I was tired of always have to say no, and they would always say, "No, we can't play." And one evening I decided, well, I had enough of that. So I took up my brother's Sydney book, and I started to read it. and I started to play.
So you had a natural instinct for it.
Yeah, and one of the things that in my household, if you made a mistake, there were so many people there to correct you. So be the last. You've heard all the
correction.
And you have heard all the music before. So every music book I took up and I look at a piece and I started to doodle on it, and I said, oh, I know this piece because I would hear it. I have heard it many times before in the household.
So two things from that. Is the in the hierarchy of instruments, is the piano then considered to be the top dog? Is that what's happening there?
Yes.
Oh.
Piano is the top dog. No doubt about that.
Okay.
Piano is it's the orchestra. Yeah.
So on this most recent album, what's it called?
It's called Foster.
That's not the big band project, that's you.
Yeah.
So tell me about that project.
The EP, well, the COVID came and I decided I'm going to do something. I need to record. And everyone was like, you're going to record it this time and put up something at this time. I say, it's a good time. In times of crisis, people always need music.
I wouldn't mind that and say people always need the arts, but I get it, you're a musician.
Yeah. So I recorded it. I have James Hurst on piano, the great James Hurst. We call him James Don't Hurt Them. And Gerald Cannon is on bass, and Willie Jones III is on drum. Willie Jones and Gerald Cannon were part of the rhythm section for Roy Hargrove, who passed, I think about less than 2 years ago. And he was a great trumpeter, one of the modern greats. And so it was a pleasure. I've known Gerald for 20-something years, and James, I've known him for over 25 years. We go back a long way in New York at a place called Small. It's still operational. But we were there in the 90s, 94, 95, and 96. We were central figures. Yeah,
okay.
That's the James.
Okay, you mentioned growing up that you grew up in a musical family. You grew up in Antigua though. And yes. I would be honest, for me, growing up in Antigua as well, I was exposed to calypso and reggae and gospel and classical, because I used to play a lot of classical on Sundays, country and western, but I didn't grow up hearing a lot of jazz. Would you say that Antigua was the environment that you found a lot of soil in terms of jazz that could feed this sort of interest in you, or was it your family was unique in that way?
My family was unique in that we listened to every single genre. We had classical, we listened to opera. We were a black family that listened to opera, and we didn't have a lot of music, recorded music. We didn't have a lot, but we had a few recordings of different genres. But we had a lot of sheet music, a lot. I tried to make sure that we had a lot. We had a big library of sheet music, and we were constantly buying. So a lot of the music that I learned was from sheet. And in those days, the local radio station, ABS, played diverse music, a lot more. There was a lot more diverse.
What is those days? What period are we talking about?
We're talking about late 60s.
Okay.
Early 70s.
So there wasn't as much calypso and that sort of thing on the radio?
There was calypso, but there was, everything was there.
Okay, I get you. It was it sounds like it was a lot more diverse even than it is now.
Yes, it was far more diverse. Saturdays, you would hear country and western.
I remember country and western.
Yes.
The country
and I woke up every morning to Ray Charles. Oh, what a beautiful morning.
See?
Oh, what a beautiful day. So that was a theme song for ABS.
Wait, is that from Oklahoma?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Okay, so you're getting two things. You're getting one of the greats of soul, and you're also getting something from the great American songbook. Isn't that like Rodgers and Hammerstein?
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. So, okay, speaking of the great American, when I listened to one of your newer tunes recently, you know how YouTube does that thing where it then recommends something that fits in the same wheelhouse, and then you're listening and you're listening. So after it played you, then the next thing it played was Frank Sinatra, right? And so I'm wondering if you see any kind of twinship there in terms of your sound, or if that's YouTube being fluky.
That's YouTube, because I don't think that I am.
Well, he does do jazz. He has done jazz standards, certainly from like the Nat King Cole era of jazz, that sort of smooth sound. He has done some of those things. So I guess that's where YouTube saw the connection. Okay, so then that begs the question, where do you see your sound fitting in the different, in terms of the different jazz eras?
My sound is retro. Yes. It fits the Frank Sinatra, Nat Cole, Billy Eckstine era.
Okay.
And in New York, that's when people come to listen to me, they think of that era.
So it's music for lovers.
Yes, definitely. My name is Foster. It means to love and to nourish. My mother made sure she told me that I name you Foster. Foster means to love and to nourish. And my maiden name is Hilderson. My mother name was Hilda.
I was wondering about that because I saw Hilderson and I was like, is that like Hilda's son?
Yes,
that's cool.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
So he named me Foster Hilderson, means to. And she didn't even feel that to me until the latter part of her life. She told me that.
You have children of your own. Are they into music?
No.
No.
They listen. They play a little, but no. My nephews are not into music. It just skipped that generation. But their children are interested.
Okay. So it's coming around again.
Yeah, it's coming around again.
Okay. All right, so I want you to do something for me. I want you to take me through the process of creating a song. I don't know, pick anyone that you like in terms of your favorite or something that's close to you or something that was technically difficult. But I want to hear how it happens, if that's possible at all. I know it's an impossible question, but as much as possible, how it happens in terms of the writing of it, but also the expression of it, the vocalization of it, the phrasing and all of that. Can you think of an example and kind of walk me through it?
Well, I can think of a song that I wrote. I was walking along Oakland Street, and there was a young lady in front of me. She was a distance away, and I was walking behind her, and we ended up in the same bank. And I started to talk, we started a conversation. And from the conversation, it inspired me. So I went home and everything started to flow. I started to think of the way she walked in front of me, going towards going into town. And yes, and the conversation that we had. And I came home immediately. I got on my keyboard and I started writing. And there's a lot of revision. You write something and it doesn't seem right. You see, as a vocalist, I'm constantly looking at lyrics. So I'm pretty good at lyrics. But when I write something and this is not picture that I want.
Does the music and the lyrics happen, because you say you sat at your keyboards, that the music and the lyrics are happening at the same time?
For me, it happens at the same time. There are other people who write lyrics and then the music, but I'm primarily to come together. I might just do a simple phrase and that will trigger the rest of the song. Mm-hmm. It will trigger how I craft the verse and the bridge and things like that.
So can I request you give us a little sample of that song, an a cappella of that song inspired by that lady?
Well, I can tell you something, my keyboard is like a weather station. So it gives problem when it's
well, that's why I said a cappella. I mean, the keyboard would be nice, but if you can give us a little some without the keyboard, that'd be fine too.
It's actually on my EP, Know Your Mind. Now your mind, don't discourage all the feelings that you fear. My poor heart has less worries, because you are here, my dear.
Now, did this lady ever get to hear this song, I wonder? I know, as a writer myself, I love that story. I love that, you know, you're walking through life and different things just inspire you, and from that comes inspiration, and from that comes art. And the person may someday be listening to the song and not even realize that it had anything to do with them at all.
Well, I told her that. Because we became friends. She resides in New Jersey at the moment. And I told her that song is for you. So.
That's a beautiful story then. Perfect circle, it comes full circle. The phrasing of it though, how do you, is that something that happens organically, or is that something that you work out? I think, for instance, I'm going to go back to Calypso for a little bit. You know, Short Shirt.
Oh, yes.
I think that Short Shirt is a master of phrasing. He takes, you look at his songs that he did, for instance, with Shelley Tobit, who again, I think is one of our best writers. And those songs have some complicated lines that you read them, and there's no way you can make this rhythmic and melodic, and he manages to sell it. And you can feel him at ease within the lines, and it doesn't feel rushed, it doesn't feel too tight, you feel the air between the lines. And so, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to explain that. I think of it as phrasing. I think, for instance, I know Aretha Franklin is one of the artists that you love. She's again a master of phrasing, in my opinion. When she takes someone else's song and remakes it, it becomes something else. And that's because she puts her signature on it. So I'm thinking of Short Shirt, I'm thinking of Aretha, I'm thinking of how you approach phrasing the lyrics attached to the music and making it into this thing that somehow seems to flow naturally. How does that happen, that part of it? And do you agree about Short Shirt and Aretha, or am I completely off the mark?
No, you're not off the mark, because Shelley Tobit and Short Shirt, that combination were beautiful. That was our best, to me, our best era.
100% cosign over here.
I mean, that era is just...
And we don't even know what we had. It was masterful.
Those, as you said, those songs are difficult for the lyrics and music to match. It takes a master to put it together. And Short Shirt is a master.
I agree.
And how I do, because I've listened to so much music in my life, it's a natural thing to me. If I phrase something and I don't like it, I will do it over again until I'm comfortable with it. And I record. When I'm practicing, I record myself. So yeah. I can tell when something fits well. But before I used to record, I live in a household of singers.
And they're going to tell you. The other thing I'm wondering, as I mentioned, Aretha, is you think of songs like Bridge Over Troubled Waters or even Respect. The arrangement that she does, the vocal arrangement, becomes something, it becomes its own entity compared to what, for instance, Simon and Garfunkel did with Bridge Over Troubled Waters, or even Eleanor Rigby, the Beatles. So I guess my question is, as you're working it out, especially when you work in a genre or an era of a song that has other crooners, that have a Nat King Cole, that has a Sinatra, whatever, how hard do you have to work to sound like you, as opposed to picking up any unconscious mimicry of other artists, so that you do what Aretha does, which is make it your own?
Well, one of the problems that I encounter, and people always compare me to Nat King Cole.
I hear it. I hear it.
And I never had a Nat King Cole record.
Oh, really?
We never had a Nat King Cole record. My neighbor had Frank Sinatra. The Percival gas station, they had some Frank Sinatra recorded. So on Sundays, they would play some of his recordings. So Nat King Cole, I never had a recording of him until I went to New York. A gentleman heard me performing and gave me all of Nat King Cole recordings.
So he heard you and thought there was something there, something similar. Okay.
Yes. And what surprised me there.
But it's still you.
It's me.
Yeah.
But on my EP, surprisingly, though people didn't say I sound like Nat King Cole or that.
They said it sounded like Foster Joseph.
Yeah, that's
good. That's what you want, right? That's a beautiful thing.
That's all I wanted.
Yes.
That's all I wanted, because it was in New York, they used to call me Little Nat.
Oh.
And yes, I've had opportunities with people come and ask me to do projects because they want to sound alike Nat King Cole, and I refuse those projects.
I get it. You're not a tribute band. You're an original.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of music, you have a project that I want to touch on a little bit. Are you involved with a project that's about documenting and celebrating Antiguan music? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, Khadija Simon, she's going to be a major player. She's an awesome player. We are friends, and we have long conversations. When we're on the phone, it's like 2-3 hours we go by. So she's always asking me about the past. And one day she said, we need to document some of the people you mentioned. And that's how that started, because we would have these long conversations. I would tell about what my parents told me. There was a Clarence Prophet on the page. Much Antiguans didn't know anything about him. I learned about him through a gentleman called Dick Hyman, who wrote a book called Century of Jazz Piano. And he used to come to Antigua at the Anchorage back in the 70s, in 60s and 70s. This was pre-Sanders. They would bring in top jazz players from the United States. And Dick Hyman is one of the players. And we became friends. And one day he said to me, there's an Antiguan who was pretty good. And he told me about him. I went home and I asked my father. And he said, yes, they were friends, because he would spend a short time. He wasn't born in Antigua. His grandparents were Antiguan, but he was born in New York.
His name again?
Clarence Prophet. He's so I did some research on him. I actually told Tim Hector about it many years ago. Tim Hector wrote an article about it. But since then
he's from like the ragtime era. Is that way back?
Yeah, he was from ragtime into swing.
Okay.
So if you he and Thelonious Monk were friends.
Okay.
And people like that. He didn't live very long. There's a few recordings of him, but he made an impact. The trio that Nat King Cole started, his first trio with guitar, bass, and piano. Clarence Prophet was the innovative one with that.
Okay.
And he actually spent time, he came and spent time in Antigua. He and my father became friends when he was in Antigua.
So it was wanting to share stories like his that led you to the project?
Yeah, I wanted to share stories about him. I wanted to share stories there. People don't remember Neil Willock. He was a jazz pianist when he was my neighbor actually at Tidwell Road. So he had a trio, and people don't know about him. People don't know anything about a gentleman by the name of Darcy. I think that is his name, Darcy. There was a player who I would call the father of modern music in Antigua. His name is Arnold Sugar Williams. He had a tremendous effect on my life. He taught
you call him the father of modern music in Antigua?
Yeah, in Antigua. Wow. And no one
I'm saying wow because there's so many names that you're calling just now. I mean, obviously I'm not as steeped in the world as you are, but we need to document these histories better. So it's good that you're doing this project because we need to know these things.
Well, with as we call them, he taught me about modes. Because in the 60s, modern music was a thing. You had people like Miles Davis, and so they were into modern stuff. And Sugar was all into that. When he started talking about modern stuff in Antigua, no one knew what he was talking about. So he took me under his wing and he gave me all the books, and most important thing, he gave me all the recordings. I had a lot of recordings because he used to live in the United States, and he brought up all the major recordings of the major jazz artists. He brought them, and he practically gave them all to me. Wow. So I had, that is my university, because I would sit down in the afternoon and listen. In the like midday, I was by Sugar. There's a band house, Mr. Gardner, Barry Gardner. He was a tailor, but he was also a musician. He played saxophone. That was a place. So we would go there and rehearse maybe about 11 until 1. And then he would say, listen to the recording when you go home of so XYZ. So I'd go back home and I would listen to the recording, and when we play the night, we would execute. And
as we start to wrap up, something that I want to tie together that you've been saying is that you have to listen to a lot of music and a lot of different types of music. You have to practice a lot, and you have to trust your voice and experiment. Those are things that I'm getting from what you're saying about how to make a musician, how to become better as a musician. Would you agree, and what would you add to that list?
You must be humble. What did I say?
Musician, you sure?
One of the things that when you're like I'm in New York and I go into a recording studio, I'm usually the weakest link in that recording studio. So when I go in there and I see all of these great musicians who are so humble, and there's no egos that are flying around the room, I know what it's like. When you reach at a certain level, there is, I have seldom met a great musician who ego, when it comes to recording and things that they trash talk and things like that. there's trash talk, but not in that setting. When they get on the bandstand, you know, it's business. You're here to perform.
So there's what they project, and there's who they really are and how they are together in the studio, collaborating with others. And the projection is not necessarily the true image. It's part of what you're saying, that you might see the bravado, you might see the I'm the best, whatever, but there's a lot of humility in the process.
Yeah, that's been my experience. You know, I can't call for other people, but my experience being in the studio with some of the top players, you know, they will tell you where you're going wrong. They will make suggestions. You know, sometimes I don't always take the suggestions. I said no. I would push back and say no. I'm not doing that. And they say okay. And we record it and we listen and see how it goes.
And usually 9 times out of 10, are they right or wrong?
I would say 9 out of 10. I'm usually right.
You have a good sense of what works for you. What's your sound? And you have the other thing I'm getting from what you're saying is that you have to be willing to listen, but you also have to have confidence.
Yeah.
Which is not at odds with humility. Humility and confidence are not necessarily at odds with each other, because confidence is about, yes, you're taking in the information and you're considering it, but you also know what your voice is, what your intention is musically, and what you want to put out. So you listen, but you also listen here as well to yourself.
Yes.
Do you agree? Okay.
Because I've experienced that, especially in the big band recording. There was one song that was very difficult. It's a blues. And, you know, being a West Indian, it's like they're singing calypso. So I had a lot of problems with that song. And actually, it's now my favorite song on the upcoming album. Because I know the amount of words.
What's the song?
It's one of the blues. I don't remember this. I don't even remember.
That's all right.
But it gave me a lot of trouble. I didn't choose the song. The producer chose that song, and he wanted me to sing in a particular way. And I had about 4 takes on it. Normally, I only do 2 takes, maybe 3. And I probably did maybe about 5, because he was like, no, Foster, that's not the way the blues is sung. And even though I've listened to a lot of blues singers, as Ray Charles is a big blues singer I've listened to all my life. But I wasn't, it's a different type of blues. That from the players. This is, you know, different part of the United States have a different sound. And that's what I learned.
So how did that turn out in the end?
Oh, it's, as I tell you, it's my favorite song.
So you like the struggle? That's the blues right there.
Yeah, it was a struggle. And it was, you know, in the studio, behind the scenes, there's the talk, you know, people would tell you off. You know, they would tell you face to face what they think of you at that particular passage. But after everything is fired, you know, everything is fired into Mali.
Okay, last question. What's your when you look back over your career, obviously your career is still in progress, but what has been the moment? And you can interpret the moment any way you want. But what has been the moment for you, capital T, capital M, in your career so far?
I think the recording at Lincoln Center is a very important milestone for me, because I used to walk by that building all the time. And I think about it. I said, well, am I ever going to go into that building? So that is a milestone. Also, when in 94, they opened a new club in New York, and they invited the top 30 jazz singers in New York City. And I was selected among the 30.
That's good. That's a moment. That's a the moment.
Actually, I was the oldest singer who sang 3 times that
nice.
night.
Nice. So I guess my final question is, have you had the moment or a moment that fits in that frame yet in Antigua and Barbuda? Where does jazz fit? Where do you fit in the music scene in Antigua and Barbuda? And have you had the moment yet here?
In the past, but not lately. In the late 70s, we had a trio called Sugar from the same Arnold Williams. And we played at Brother B's. And we were dynamic. We had a crowd. People used to think it was a recording. People who walked on High Street and then come to the alley. When they come to the alley and they realize it's live music, they were always surprised. And also we played at Shawshed down at Dixon Bay. And that was magical. So I've had those moments. Actually, the best moment that I had in Antigua was to an empty hall.
Was where?
Played to an empty hall. There was a club just to the west of All Saints Police Station. Okay. And Sugar asked us to play. It was holiday. I think it was Labor Day. And we had jazz group. And we cut them in size to a trio, and we went there to play. And nobody showed up. And the gentleman was, the proprietor said, well, I already bought all the drinks and everything, and you're going to have to play for me. And we played, and it was that aha moment that we realized that the trio was good. Mm. So that was one of those moments. We sat and we looked at each other and said, we sounded, it's fine, because what happened, we practiced it, and we wasn't getting to that point. And that day, everything clicked. And that's how we became a trio.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful, because it also underscores that it's about the music. I mean, the audience is nice, but the music is its own thing.
Yeah. We realized that day that we are going to be a trio. The trio was myself, Sugar, Arnold Williams on bass, and Jerome Joseph was on drums. And
nice. Well, I wish you continued musical evolution and success. Thanks for chatting with me today. I learned a lot. And I will continue to check out. What's the website called?
Which one? My website?
Well, your website is Foster Joseph, yes?
Joseph.
Without the music, that's the other website, yes?
Yes.
Without the music scene. So I'll continue to check that out. And as I said, continued success. And we'll look out for the future projects and continue listening to the current album.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.